How hard could it be to use a hammer? Well, not very, but to use a hammer efficiently, safely, and effectively is easier said than done. So in this video, I'm going to show you those 3 things. Coming up. Hey guys, it's David here from David's DIY Reviews. On this channel we do how-to videos, tutorials, reviews, and other great content around DIY and woodworking for you at home. So if you're new to the channel, consider subscribing for more videos just like this one. The first thing to using a hammer is just having a good decent hammer around the house. I like to use a 16 ounce or in metric 450 gram hammer. That's a good medium range hammer. Not too big, not too small. It's not going to be overkill on smaller projects. It's still going to be big enough to drive heavier nails into harder wood. So that's my first suggestion, is just getting a decent hammer, because old, worn out, too heavy, too light hammers, it's just going to be a nightmare. My first tip for you guys is going to be holding the hammer. You want to hold the hammer with your thumb pointing down the length of the hammer. That's going to help guide the hammer when you're nailing. Also, I know when you're just starting out, it's easy to want to choke up on the hammer and hold it closer to the head, but that's actually going to make it difficult for you, and that's a bad habit to get into. In the long run, you really want to hold the hammer at the end like this on the handle, and that's going to help use the weight of the hammer to drive the nails when you're nailing. The next thing is going to be holding the nail when you're nailing. You want to hold the nail close to the material that you're nailing, and you want to just tap the nail in to get it started, just like this, just small taps to get it started. Also, if you're using softer wood, sometimes you can actually just press the nail into the wood with your finger and it will stand on its own, and then you can just hold it lightly and start your nailing. And remember, when you're starting your nail, let the weight of the hammer start to tap it in. Once you have the nail started, you want to move your hand away from the nail and hold the material, or put your hand out of danger's way to start nailing the nail. So you want to move your hand and then go ahead and start. And when you're nailing, you want to make sure you're striking the nail with the head of the hammer parallel to the nail itself, so that it drives the nail straight down into the wood. And as you begin to actually finish nailing the nail in, you want to swing the hammer with your elbow. And as you're nailing, you always want to be focusing on the head of the nail. If when you're nailing you bend the nail, if you haven't nailed it in too far, you're always best to remove the nail and start over, because once the nail is bent, it's weakened and it's just never going to drive into your material very well. So you're always best to just remove it. If when you're nailing the nail starts to lean and it hasn't gone in too far, what you can do is actually strike the hammer slightly across the head of the nail like this, and when you're nailing, that will actually straighten the nail out. And my second really good tip for you guys, if you happen to be nailing through something that's fairly deep or one piece into another, and you want to pull the nail and restart it for whatever reason, it's, if possible, always best to restart in a new position, because otherwise the nail is going to follow the old hole, and if it bent the first time or was crooked the first time, it's going to follow that hole and do the exact same thing the second time. So just move the nail over and start over. That's going to help a lot. Another good tip for you guys on what not to do is you don't want to nail right near the end of a piece of wood, especially if it's hardwood, because it's going to crack the end of the wood. If you have to nail near the end, or you're nailing in thinner wood that's going to crack easily, you can pre-drill and just slide the nail through the first piece of wood and then nail it into the second piece of wood, and that's going to make it really good. That's going to help you with a lot of smaller, kind of finicky projects with small wood, thin wood, hardwood. It's going to help you from cracking your project when nailing. Another tip to try not to crack the material when you're using a hammer and nailing is if you can nail through the grain rather than across the grain, it's going to help whenever possible to keep the wood from cracking. And hey, if you're just getting into woodworking, getting into using tools and building projects on your own, but you're having a little difficulty, check out this playlist in the YouTube card above. I've got a lot of great content in there on using hand tools. It's going to be a lot of help for you guys. So the next biggest thing is using a hammer to remove nails. That's probably one of the most difficult things that I see people struggling with. And the first part of that is holding the hammer properly. You want to hold the hammer with a reverse grip like this so that you can leverage up on the nail. So how you want to go about removing a nail is you slide the hammer into the nail, pull the claw up just to under the head, brace the material with your other hand, and you want to start just with little bumps like this to kind of work the nail loose. And then you can really give it one good pull and it's going to pull the nail out. And whenever possible, once you've removed your nail, you don't want to reuse old nails that have been pulled because they'll be bent, the heads will be ruined, and they're just not going to nail back into your wood all that well. So whenever possible, throw that nail away, start with a new one. And a couple tips for protecting your material when you're removing nails. If you want to protect the material, you can lay a piece of wood on top, then slide your hammer on top and leverage on top of that, and then your hammerhead's not going to damage the wood. Also, if you have a really long nail that's really tall and you can't quite get the leverage with the hammer, you can slip in a thicker piece of wood that's going to bring the hammerhead closer to the head of the nail, and it's going to allow you to pull that nail much easier. And if you're starting a project and you're kind of afraid that you're going to damage the wood or bend the nails or struggle with using a hammer, don't be afraid to just grab a scrap piece of wood and some nails and practice driving them in. You really want to focus on looking at the head of the nail when you hammer, and that's really going to help. Just give it a few tries, practice, and then get into your project, and you won't be so apt to damage it. And when you're nailing and you almost have the nail all the way in, slow down at the end, and that's going to keep you from damaging the wood as you're getting the nail flush with the surface. And like with most hand tools, the hammer is one of those ones where the more you use it, the better you're going to get. So just start using a hammer, start making some projects, and you'd be surprised how good and how quick you get at using a hammer. And if you got value out of this video, don't forget to like and subscribe for much more good content just like this. And leave it in the comments below if you think I've maybe left out some good tips or good tricks that maybe you have for using a hammer. And like always guys, check in every Monday and Wednesdays, unlike the last video where I said Tuesdays and Wednesdays. So Monday, Wednesdays, new content, David's DIY reviews. Check it out.